Welcome back. In this section I want to talk about how we can set up some basic movement for our apple tree. So let's start with that. To begin, we want to create some property that we can change maybe in the editor. That is, that the artist can change, and that is going to determine the movement speed. So in other words, how fast our tree is going to move across the screen. I will decorate that new property with edit anywhere, and I'll put it in the category setup. This is just the float variable that the artist will see maybe somewhere in the editor, but the actual calculation will be done in the tick function. So in the construct, I'll just give that a default value. Now, of course, in the class definition, you can go and give it a default value right here, but I prefer to keep my initializations in one place, and that is in the constructor. So I'm using the constructor initialization list for that. Then we want to go down to the tick function. We call the parent tick, so super tick, and then we want to do some calculations here. If you think about it for a second, what do we want to do? We want to move the actor, right? So we have the apple tree in our level, and then for every frame we want to apply some offset. So we have an F vector here. We use get actor location to get the current location. This here is going to return an F vector, okay? And then we assign that whatever the actor's current location is at that particular frame to some temporary position or location. You can call it temp location if you want to. That makes more sense for you. Next, we want to apply some offsets. We have that temp location now. Then we want to apply some offset to that in a particular direction, depending on how fast we want that actor to move. And then, of course, we simply go and set the actor location. Okay, so this is basically what we want to do. We want to add an offset, and then we want to set the new location. So how can we go about doing that? Well, firstly, we need to think about what direction do we actually want to move the actor in. And for this, we need to think ahead in terms of what we want to do going forward. At the bottom of the screen, again, we want some basket that the player can move to the left and to the right with keyboard input, for example, maybe using the A and the D keys. So this is not going to work in 3 dimensions. We will play this game basically on a plane. For this, we need to take into consideration what the positive up vector, the positive right vector, and the positive forward vector is in Unreal Engine 5. And that is because when we move our basket with play input and we press the right button, then we want that to move in the positive right vector. Now in Unreal Engine, the positive right vector is going to be temp location.y. Okay, so we add that offset, and then we want to set the new location to the temp location. Of course, it's kind of obvious what's going on here, but I'll just keep these comments here for reference. So we are adding an offset, and then we want to set the actor location to the new location that includes that offset. And this is all we are going to do for now. So I'll just go and build and run this, see what we get. That will compile fine, and we'll now launch the editor. Okay, so that has launched. And now I can drag in that blueprint. Remember, this blueprint inherits from that C++ class, so I can drag that in. I will reset that location, and maybe I'll move that up a bit. Set the location in Z to positive 450. I'll frame up on that, and I'll zoom out a bit. Okay, but now if I go and simulate, I'll just go and simulate this. We can see that thing moves off way to the side really quickly. And of course, that is no good. We need some time-based movement, so the movement is more consistent. That is regardless of our frame rate. We also need to make sure that this is movable, but that is currently set to movable, so that's fine. Just double check. So basically, again, the positive right vector in Unreal Engine is the positive y. So that is really what we are concerned with. For input, we will use that positive y to move our basket to the right in the positive right direction. And of course, we'll do the opposite of the positive right vector to move to the left. So these are things that we have to consider when setting up our game. But more on that later when we get to the lecture on pawns and input. Okay, I'll just go back to Visual Studio here, and As I mentioned, currently we'll get inconsistent movement depending on the frames per second that we get. So what we want to do is we want to make the movement code time-based so that our Apple tree moves at a consistent speed, again regardless of the frame rate. Now to do that, we are going to multiply the movement speed with the delta time that is passed in. You can see we get the delta time here as a parameter in the tick function. So we are going to use the delta time. And that's it. That is all we have to do to make this movement code time-based. And I'll go back to Unreal Engine here, the editor, Control Alt F11, and that should now recompile that. And now if I go and simulate, you'll see that moves much slower. Alright, stop that. I would also like to mention that in the details, we can now go and modify the movement speed. So we should have a setup section. Down here you can see we have setup, and that is the category that we created, and we have movement speed. Okay, and that is our value that we have set by default. And we also have that if I open up the blueprint. I will click to open up the full blueprints, and under the class defaults we can see we have under setup, we have movement speed, right? And I'll just go and click save all.